And what goes into the shadow is not bad. Many people think it's our bad or evil aspects. It's what's ever too light, too bright, or too dark for the family and the culture that you were raised in. And so you could have a child born, a very, very joyful child, into a very cynical, sarcastic family. That child's joy will have to go into their shadow. So it's not just, the things that we shouldn't expose to the world. It's actually attributes that may contain and usually do some of our greatest gifts. And that's the process of individuation, the shadow work, where we come to love all aspects of ourselves and we integrate them into ourselves and what Jung calls living from a wholeness of being. So instead of living this life reality from a center of ego, mind, we live it from a center of self and approaching capital S self. And you do not have to wake up to be happy, but you will.
Welcome to the Daily Soul Bytes Show. I am your host, Bolaabimbola. Daily Soul Bytes Show is where we feature expert authors, coaches, and entrepreneurs in the fields of spirituality, psychology, and leadership who share their insights for the expansion of collective consciousness. And today I have a very special guest, Deborah Westmoreland. Welcome to the show, Deborah.
Oh, thank you, Bola. It's wonderful to be here.
And a little bit about your bio before we start, Deborah. Deborah Westmoreland integrates Carl Jung's process of individuation with spiritual wisdom and somatic healing to open the path of radical self-love. She has found that when someone truly sees themselves as the Creator sees them, perfect and whole, with a unique expression to share, consciousness expands, magic happens, and the soul begins to remember. That is so wonderful. I totally agree with that. This is so key. And I would love to know, Deborah, what is it that happened at different points in your life, if you would like to share with us, that really led you to this place where you're now really an expert in this process of spiritual awakening? Could you tell us a bit about your background and why this has become such a passion for you?
I would say that my journey began when I was very young, and probably when I was 5, and I knew I was on a spiritual journey. And I remember I was raised in the military and we moved cross country a lot. And I remember learning how to meditate by watching the landscape out the car. And it was just I always knew I was in a relationship with the divine. And then I would think, as life, unfolds, I think my first really poignant experience was when I was 18. And I was waiting on tables and I was walking around a full dining room and I was saying, I had 2 coffee pots in my hand. And I was walking around asking the tables, coffee, decaf, coffee, decaf. It became like a mantra. And then all of a sudden, like everything disappeared. I disappeared. It was just blackness. And I don't know how long I was gone like that, but I came back probably a few seconds. Everyone was looking at me. And it was so frightening to me that I left work that day, called in sick for 4 days, and just sort of tried to figure out what happened to me. I didn't really figure that out, but my answer was I have to construct a self, an adult. I mean, I'm looking back at what happened now. So because of that introduction to the void, I said I signed up for school. I finished all the way to my graduate program. I met a lovely, my beloved Andrew. We got married. We had a beautiful life. I felt like I was a responsible, happy adult. Still very much connected to my spiritual practices and my studies. My mom, when I was very young, introduced me to all the masters from Rumi and Hafiz to Jung and Rogers, all those. So I was reading those when I was very young. And I continued to sort of delve into these, beautiful teachings and of these writers and poets. And then in 2001, my husband was killed in a tragic accident. And that moment really defined my spiritual journey on a very accelerated path. I realized that I could be the young, bitter widow. He was 32 when he was killed. We were very young. And everyone in the community would embrace me and allow me to be that person for the rest of my life. And I could be the bitter person, or I could choose to look at what had happened and that it was perfect. And I chose to look at it. And that accelerated my spiritual journey. And for the next 9 years, I had deep practices. Yoga was a deep practice for me. I went 3 or 4 times a week, my community, my kula. I did running. I was running half marathons, hiking. I was always in nature. So that became my spiritual practices for understanding, understanding suffering. Why am I suffering and how do I end my suffering? During the pandemic, and I was forced to close my Pilates yoga studio, and I decided to sell my house. And just since I was a young child, the walking on water story in the New Testament always felt like a koan to me. Like, what is this walking on water? I know it was a miracle, but there's a deeper teaching behind that. And for me, I wanted to know that walking on water faith, where I just let go of everything and surrender and come as close as I can to how Christ lived his life in his calling. And so I just let it all go. The dogs and I lived in a truck and an RV for a year. We traveled all over. I finally moved to Santa Fe. And then in the middle of that year in Santa Fe, I had a profound dream. I talked to my dreams. I said, dreams, what about my work? I had a profound dream where I was living on the coast of Mexico. I owned this tiki juice bar. I was renting Vespas and bikes, and there was live music and dancing and singing at night. And in the dream, at the end of my bar, the trickster was sitting there, the archetype. And it was kind of like a cross between Joaquin Phoenix and the Joker and some Aztecian god. And he was sitting at the end of the bar, and he was going like this, ha, 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 I only have you halfway. Oh my goodness. This is what the process, this is like opening up to life does. So I woke up from the dream. I didn't want to live on the coast. I'm Irish. That's too hot for me. So I just did a search. Are there any high desert towns in Mexico like Santa Fe? San Miguel de Allende came up. I booked my ticket. I came that September for 2 weeks. My whole heart opened. It felt like home because I was on this walking on water faith. I know what the divine has in store for me is coming for me, is coming, that I will meet it. I'm just going to surrender and have this walking on water faith. And I went back to Santa Fe. I packed, sold many things, and then moved here with the dogs. We drove here with the dogs. I've been here 2.5 years.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. It's always interesting when I listen to guests and they tell me about how some of the journey started, a big part of the journey started from very young. Mm-hmm. Because I also had a mother who was a librarian, and we had books from all over the world at home. And I also started to read different books. And I remember the book titled Who Am I by Ramana Maharishi. And I did not know who he was, but the book introduced me to those selves, the higher self and the physical ego self. And this was at age 18. So, we do not realize sometimes how some of the experiences that we have, because I truly believe that we choose our parents. And sometimes it's not always a smooth journey. It's sometimes quite rocky. But when I hear these accounts, and also compared to mine, there is definitely a reason that we start off getting really embedded into these spiritual practices from much earlier on. And I'd love you to tell us, Deborah, what is life from a spiritual perspective?
So I think life is looked at either two ways, that we believe that we are we are the victim of an external world, a hard external world in which we are walking through this external experience, and we don't really have any control over it. We just make the best decisions we can. We go with the rules and the philosophies around how we're taught the world works. And then there's the spiritual perspective, which is your world is first manifested within, and then you walk through the world as it outwardly manifests, but first created from within. So not as a victim of an external world, but experiencing the dream reality we call life, first from the creational desire within.
I love that. This is really key, because that spiritual awakening process allows us to really begin to understand what our spiritual life is like, who we are as spirit beings. And I think it's really important for us to also understand that journey is not linear. I remember meeting you, Deborah, in 2016. I was going through a very rough time, and I was at crossroads. And I remember you introduced me to inner inquiry, and I really began to work with it, to really go within myself. And I know we had a couple of sessions, and I remember seeing you, Deborah, on Conscious TV, and immediately I heard your interview on Conscious TV. I emailed you straight away, and I needed to understand your book, Being, Knowing, Being, something around a similar title. But and after a couple of sessions, I really began to see changes in my life. My son, who we had been looking for accommodation for him, going through transition, and within 6 months of my discussions with Deborah, actually, we got handed keys for his new place. So it's really beginning to understand, I guess, for every level. This is after years of studying and training with, myself. There are always new levels, and there's always ups and downs as that spirit being, and understanding the body, because I was also going through a lot of stuff at the time. So I want you to tell us, Deborah, what is the relationship, or what is our relationship with the body? How does somatic work really support the spiritual awakening process?
Well, the way I teach now is from like 3 pillars. Of course, the integration of spiritual teachings and the understanding the foundational aspects of non-duality. And then the second one is somatic work, is like attending to the body. And my third pillar is the process of individuation, shadow work, making the unconscious conscious. So what I noticed when I was teaching workshops and retreats all over the world with self-inquiry and spiritual wisdom was deeply realized people who had awakenings or had expanded consciousness were still bumping up on their trauma and conditioning. And there's many teachings that says the small character, it's made of nothingness. And what I want to make very clear now is everything is made of nothingness. It doesn't make it less sacred. But what I noticed was that, there wasn't the full expression. There wasn't the full and highest expression of the small self, which is made of nothingness. And when I talk about a full expression, I talk about the potential for our full expression as we are created by our creator, divine, whatever. And the example I like to give is a peach tree. If you see a peach tree in its full expression, the leaves are green and lush and full. There's the peach trees the peaches smell like perfume. They're juicy and ripe, and it's just absolutely amazing full expression of the peach tree. Well, we're no different. And then, so what kind of conditions does the peach tree need for that? Well, it needs rich soil with the right nutrients. It needs sun. It needs the right amount of water. It needs room to grow into its full expression. Well, the human being is no different. Everything comes with its full expression in the dream. And a human being is no different. So for me, the body is the proximity point into the dream. And what I mean by proximity point is there's only one consciousness, and it's God consciousness. And where do you experience it from? Where do you experience God consciousness? From the proximity point. The body and the senses is the mechanism that's interfacing with the dream reality. So I have come to hold very dear that if I ever get into get in front of a creator or higher self, if there's like an exchange after death, I want to be able to like be at the feet of my creator saying, I hope I honored this dream you gave us of the body experience. Because source, the abyss, boy, there's nothing. There's nothing. Yet within it, creator has made this beautiful thing called life that we experience. And we experience it through our body and our senses. So attending to the body is really important, because if you've got a dysregulated nervous system, or if you don't know how to breathe, it affects your perception of the dream. And so I've been an athlete my whole life. I did 24 years of Vaganova ballet. I ran hurdles. I was a dancer. I mean, everything. Volleyball, you can name it. Brown belt in karate. So I was literally, based on a pretty crazy childhood, I was actually regulating my nervous system in real time, not knowing I was doing it through sports and other activities. So some people come to me and they want to wake up and they don't know how to breathe yet, right? Or their nervous system is dysregulated. So I found that that's really important. And also the trauma that we experience and we hold on to as memory lives in the tissue, lives in the body. So how do we regulate our nervous system and release the trauma so we can let those limiting beliefs go around trauma? And it's by practices, hiking, running, walking, being in nature, anything where our nervous system gets regulated. Breath work, we can do breath work right at our desk at work. And you'll notice in the 8 limbs of yoga that breath work comes before meditation and samadhi. Like the asanas, moving your body, then the breath work, then the meditation, and then samadhi. There's a reason why we want to have a free, healthy body that's relaxed to go into meditation, right? And so how do we relax the body? Through asanas, or what we call our practice, physical practices, then our breath work. So we come to a clear mind and we can actually get out of the limiting beliefs. Well, that's how we regulate the body that way. When we come into these states of samadhi is when we feel the oneness of the universe. The recognition of true nature is that we are, like within us is the universe, right? I am the stuff that made God. Not I am God, but true nature, I am the stuff that made God. And so somatic work is really, to me, it's really important because it holds the beauty of this dream experience we call life. How we experience everything through our senses and our body. And then many times people are experiencing their life from a center of ego, is what Jung would call it, which is why I started, which is why I got my ICF certified Jungian life coaching certification, and also worked with the Jungian analyst for many years. He mentored me to teach me the deeper practices of Jung's process of individuation, because we can't come into a full expression as our creator created us until we see ourselves as the creator sees us, perfect and whole. So between the ages of 18 months up till 4, we start creating an ego. So anything that receives love and acceptance goes into our persona. The ego says, oh, this is good. You can show this to the world. You will receive love and acceptance, because as children, we need love and acceptance to survive. And then anything that doesn't receive love and acceptance goes into our shadow, which becomes unconscious. And that's how the ego creates persona and shadow. The ego is not evil or malicious. It's just trying to keep you safe. And you can also develop a healthy relationship with the ego. It's just a texture in the dream. And what goes into the shadow is not bad. Many people think it's our bad or evil aspects. It's what's ever too light, too bright, or too dark for the family and the culture that you were raised in. And so you could have a child born, a very, very joyful child, into a very cynical, sarcastic family. That child's joy will have to go into their shadow. So it's not just, the things that we shouldn't expose to the world. It's actually attributes that may contain and usually do some of our greatest gifts. And that's the process of individuation, the shadow work, where we come to love all aspects of ourselves and we integrate them into ourselves and what Jung calls living from a wholeness of being. So instead of living this life reality from a center of ego, mind, we live it from a center of self and approaching capital S self. And you do not have to wake up to be happy, but you will. And what I have found is that awakening is a gift. We cannot steal the gift of awakening from the hands of the divine. That gift is granted when the divine chooses when to give it to us. But we can align ourselves so well and make ourselves magnetic to awakening by coming into the full expression of the small self. And so that's why I use these three pillars of teaching: understanding the deep wisdom, the spiritual teachings, ancient to very, very wise modern teachers. Why I add somatic work, and then also doing the process of individuation, particularly shadow work, so we can come into an integrated small self. That we can do on our own, and we can come into a very deep peace before awakening. We can come into a very deep peace, answering our calling, being of service. We can experience such joy and happiness because we are expressing ourselves as we were meant to express uniquely, only that we can do in this moment. And when we answer our service, it brings us great joy too. Not only the people in the world we help, but we feel aligned. And when we are aligned with our full expression, we find ourselves surrounded by the people we are meant to be in relationship with. We find our life opening with such grace and ease, and opportunities open that are perfectly aligned to our expression. We're no longer hiding behind an ego-governed self.
This is a good place for me to ask you, Deborah. Thank you so much for those three pillars. This is the spiritual teachings, as well as really understanding the role of the body in releasing those imprints that have really stopped us from understanding that connection to our big S self. And also the individuation, where we're really understanding. I believe in the parts. My work is around the parts of that's usually described in the Internal Family Systems by Richard Schwartz. And really that individuation allows us to, it's called different names. I think the thing about modalities is we're usually doing very similar work, but it's called different things. And there's that point where all the different parts of us are really coming to understand and surrender more to that big self, to that true self. This is our true, authentic spirit self. But I wanted to ask you, did you want to say something?
Whatever tools delight us, because this is all play. So it's not, as long as you don't make anything your religion and you know that you are your own guru, your intuition leads. So I open my astrology chart sometimes and play, because it opens up a way of thinking about things differently. Yeah. Sometimes I am writing, it inspires a poem or inspires a way to look at things. I know that my intuition will guide me, whether it's astrology or individuation. Many people, right, there's many tools to play with. So we pick the ones that delight us and inform us of our true nature. Thanks. And a lot of times, and some people will say, I'm this or I'm that. What you want to know is you are it, and everything is for you. So pick what delights you. Pick the play you want. I say don't pick practices that you don't like. You won't do them every day. Pick something that you love.
I do agree with you. It's about really knowing what we are led with, and trusting whatever it is that is available to us, that is affordable to us, that we're ready to dedicate our time to. But I did want to just a simple definition for what spiritual awakening is. What is spiritual awakening?
It's the recognition of true nature. That true nature is the dazzling blackness, the void, source, the abyss is home, and that is you. If the dream went away, if all of this that's happening went away, it would not matter. You would still exist. You are the dazzling blackness. And then within that dazzling blackness, Bola arises, Deborah arises, the forest arises, the earth arises, the food arises, your coffee cup arises. That's the recognition of true nature.
That process of understanding true nature, and you refer to it as nothingness. And I think for a lot of us, that understanding of nothingness is something that we would probably need many lifetimes to understand what that nothingness is. But we do.
Well, there is no understanding.
Let me just finish this, Deborah.
There is no understanding it.
We do. I'll come back to actually allow you to kind of follow on, Deborah. But I did want to just clarify those steps, because there is a disconnection from spirit when we come into this duality. That is what I have come to understand.
There's a disconnection from what?
From that spirit self, that higher self. And the nothingness contains everything, because when we look at ourselves, there is the entire room. And we always think that we as avatars are the only thing that we are, but we are actually the room. So I understand when you say we are the nothingness that contains both the spirit, which is the higher self, and the physical ego self. But that spiritual awakening process, that as we commonly know it, is an understanding of, as you said, the spiritual teachings. There is also the understanding of the body and how the body needs to let go of all the different imprints. And then there's the individuation of self, which really is the awakening that helps us to awaken at different levels. Because just because you went through some understanding of your imprints, you were aware of your parts, you were understanding the teachings, you did that in 2010, it doesn't mean you will not need to do that again. So it's a journey. But I did want to just allow us to make this much easier for anyone who is listening to this, who is on that spiritual awakening journey. We're understanding self. We're understanding the parts of us that are wounded. We're holding space for those parts using the different modalities that are around us. And we're also understanding that this is a journey. So what would you say to that?
Well, there's the spiritual journey, and then there's a recognition of true nature. And we must disidentify with the small self in the process. And so awakening, the recognition of true nature, cannot be understood. It is beyond. When you realize that the dazzling blackness is home, there's no process. There's nothing. There is no boundaries. I had no boundaries, no fears, no questions. And it has been that way ever since that day.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
That's that space of stillness, that space of emptiness. And that allows us to, well, tell us about that. How do you live a life of wholeness from that space of emptiness, from that really divine part of us, that space of nothingness? What is it like to live from that place of nothingness in that spiritual awakening process?
So it's constant in the moment, only a moment. When someone asks me, what did you do yesterday? I literally have to reconstruct in thought what I did. There's also, it's destructive. The recognition of true nature, which is the irreversible knowing that all is one and you are it, is, I couldn't read. I couldn't talk. It was literally, laid me out, because there was no longer that single perception of I was the center of the universe that was governed by the ego. I can't overemphasize nor explain the incredible gift of awakening and how much it alters you. Like, no fears, no boundaries, no questions. Life just unfolds in the present moment, and you know there is only the moment, and everything that arises in the moment is just for embellishment of the moment. If you're looking at a photograph when you were 7, it's arising now. The photograph is arising now when you were 7 to bring the texture of nostalgia and memory to the moment. So, like, the way I teach now is my primary and highest goal for my clients is the recognition of true nature. But in the meantime, while you wait for the gift, when the divine designates it upon you in your journey, many people say, I want to wake up so I'm no longer suffering. I have found through my process that you can get rid of suffering while you wait for the gift. But I want to make a really big distinction in the process of the journey as the small self and the gift granted that you are no longer centered in the small self on awakening. It's not an understanding. It's beyond that. But in the meantime, while you wait for it, what are you going to do? Because the Creator created you. You exist in this dream reality we call life made of nothingness. So what is your full expression? How do you experience joy and purpose while you're waiting for, the gift to descend upon you? And then, so instead of wasting your life in the center of ego, like keeping yourself safe, not taking any risks, doing what you were told to do, being the person everybody in your family and culture has told you need to be, you start the process and you start self-inquiry and you start asking the deep questions. Why am I here? What's my service? How do I find delight? And then also, one of the most important things to do is to dismantle your limiting belief systems, because it's your limiting beliefs that the ego mind is put in place that keeps you from showing up as a certain persona. And then Carl Jung would say to individuate is criminal, because people will be very disrupted by your process. Like, if you start being authentic in every way, you will disrupt your world. It will not be like smooth and easy from one stage to another. You will disrupt your world, because you have to let the old crumble and deteriorate to allow something else to come up over it, which is, of course, the story of the lotus flower. Everything I'm talking about is before enlightenment. The gift of enlightenment is granted, which is irreversible, and you will know beyond knowing. Before that, you can come into this, I dare say, divine authenticity, how the Creator created you to express your highest expression. Why are you here? What is your expression? How do you bloom? How are you of service? How do you bring beauty to this dream reality we called life? Granted, made of nothingness. We don't care that it's made of nothingness. It's the only thing going on, and it's so beautiful and sacred. So when we get out of our way, when we're no longer triggered by our conditioning, and triggers are the best path to understanding what's in our unconscious, and shadow work is exploring triggers in a space that can be held with another that can see you, qualified to hold space. Because when I hold space for my clients, it's not Deborah holding space for my client. It's I am holding space for Deborah and the client in this process of awakening, which includes individuation, somatic work, and deep spiritual teachings.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. I truly love how you have explained that. There is not, because not everybody comes on this earth plane to experience spiritual awakening, and not everybody comes on that journey of enlightenment. And it's possible to be happy. It's possible to have some degree of abundance, and even a lot of abundance, even without understanding that spiritual awakening part of life.
Yes.
Because it's in this service. I love the way you have explained it as something happens to us when we are in service, when we are following our passion, when we are allowing ourselves to surrender to something that is within us. Is it possible to be happy without connecting to those higher frequencies of the divine?
What I've noticed in my clients is they can experience this joy and happiness. They can find what they want to be of service to as they wait for the recognition of true nature. There are people that are terribly abundant and know the laws of manifestation that don't seem particularly on a spiritual journey. Right? There are examples of that in the world. What are you here to do that you know in your heart, that is guided by your intuition, that fills you with gratitude? That is your cross. And we pick it up gladly, whatever it will mean. Complete surrender to whatever happens on that journey.
Thank you so much, Deborah. When those who come to work with you, what can they expect? I know that you have a workshop coming up. If you could just tell us a bit about this workshop and what those who work with you can expect when they contact you.
So I work one-on-one, and it's always about their journey, like holding space for their journey. And so some people already are deep into their own somatic practices. They're healthy, but it might be more individuation work and shadow work. It's really a decision we make together, based on how they want to be supported through their journey. It's a very individual process, so it really depends. But those are the three things that I use. And I work with many people that are in their 20s and early 30s, and they don't necessarily want their head chopped off by awakening, but they do want to come into a sovereignty of being. And I really talk about that sovereignty of being. I've even written a manifesto for young creatives because they want, they have degrees in, environmental sciences or whatever things, and they were delivering food or doing Uber or whatever. And now many of them own their own tiny homes and their own businesses. The coffee house, one has a jewelry business online, one is a marine biologist. Because in your early 20s, I wish I would have had me as a teacher, because to come into your sovereignty, to answer your calling, to take that risk, that faith, is such a beautiful thing to witness. And so I also approach people differently based on where they are in life. I hold 20 and 30-year-olds differently than 60, 70, and 80-year-olds, right? But I still have 50 and 60-year-olds that are leaving their jobs, the jobs that they were, that their persona was created, and they're becoming entrepreneurs, or they're in a completely different direction. I'd say 90% of them become entrepreneurs. Because there's such a sovereignty in working for yourself. And then you can still be in your career and be sovereign. Let's look at Jordan Peterson or Brené Brown. They're professors on faculty, but they own their calling. They own their calling. Their career is theirs. They aren't just a professor on a faculty. They are much larger than that, because they answered the calling, picked up their cross, and are of service in a much larger way than maybe that conditioned choice of just being a professor on faculty, which is still beautiful. But these are the ways that this process can transform your life while you wait for awakening. And you come to such a peace and such a joy. And I don't know, maybe for me, life is, I experience bliss with no opposite. And that's what we really want, because that's what the Creator really wants for us, to know that And when we come into radical self-love, which is integrating into a wholeness of being, we come into that full expression.
I do appreciate you joining me today, and it's really nice to reconnect in this way.
It's wonderful to reconnect, and I'm really honored that you invited me to be a guest. Thank you. I love your podcast. I love your energy and just the space you bring for these very beautiful and deep conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Deborah. I do want to thank our audience who are watching and those who are listening. And I want to ask you to connect with Deborah, because this is really about us embracing that sovereignty of being, whether we are deep in our spiritual awakening or whether we are on that way and we are following our calling and that service, that we're being intuitively led. And Deborah is really good with really helping us to shift into that place of understanding what that true nature is, even without it being a spiritual or religious thing. And I do want to ask you to also get your copy of Daily Soul Bytes, my book. And this is really talking about the lower perspectives of self and the higher perspectives of self. And now we can become much more aware of these different selves within us, so that we can come to align and to really understand what those perspectives are creating in our day-to-day, in that reflection in the day-to-day. It's all about awareness, activating a deeper self-awareness. And I do want to invite you to subscribe to Daily Soul Bytes Show, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode next week. Take very good care. Bye-bye.